Hello and welcome. Hello, hello. Come on in and find a seat. Hope you've brought your cuppa. Here we are again. I've got a friend with me today. This is BB.
Hello, BB. She looks like my 17-year-old cat. Oh, no, mine hasn't got the white, but she's got all the other. Hello, you gorgeous thing. Oh. They're good companions, aren't they?
They're very good companions. Indeed,
yeah, they're very loyal. They're so loyal. Love them.
All right. Well, welcome, everybody. I'm Jackie Malloy from Meaningful Aging Australia. And as we begin today's session, as always, let's start with our acknowledgement of country. And as I do, you can also acknowledge the lands you are joining from today in the chat. This acknowledgement was created by Jonathan Hill, who is an Indigenous Australian poet and teacher. Today we stand in footsteps millennia old. May we acknowledge the traditional owners of the Kulin Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since men and women awoke from the great dream. Meaningful Aging Australia, can't get our name right, honours the presence of these ancestors who reside in the imagination of this land and whose irrepressible spirituality flows through all creation. This month, our focus is on the wriggly squiggly in my arms, BB. No, not really. This month, our focus is on ESWOP, which stands for Exploring Spirituality with Older People, and the model arising out of this research project, the Connect Explore model. So let's begin. Just to begin, a little bit of background about the project. The two lead researchers were Ilse Hampton, who many of you will know as the previous CEO of Meaningful Aging Australia, and Laurie Leppert, a wonderful, wonderful man, Honorary Associate Professor from the University of Southern Queensland. The ESWOP project was developed to help older people articulate what matters for their core well-being and to help aged care know how to have these conversations. A little bit about the project. 58 older people were interviewed, and they are all people who were accessing aged care, whether that be in RAC, in a residential setting, or in a home care setting. There were 8 aged care services, 40 locations, 25 interviewers. All the interviews were done face-to-face. The average age of those participating was 82. The average length of the interview was 20 minutes. And the national project ran over 2019 to 2021. So a goodly amount of time. One of the things that was the umbrella to all of this is what we often talk about here, which is that although spirituality and religion are often linked, spirituality is bigger than religion or expressions of faith. Spirituality is about how we create meaning and hope, purpose and connection in our lives. So this might be a little bit new to you. If you're familiar with Connect 2, then you'll see that this bears some resemblance. I'm just going to pop BB down before she bites me. Come on down. So the Connect Explore model is a kind of simplification of the Connect 2 model. You might notice that there are 4 domains rather than the usual 5. And these provided bigger doorways for an open conversation. And the interviewer feedback was that this model provided some flexibility around having these conversations and allowing some sub-themes to emerge from these bigger doorways. It was easier for people to sort of grab a hold of. And so the big difference is that instead of nature having its own domain, that nature now sits under, in the Connect Explore model, something greater than, something higher than. So we've got the self in the middle, the relationship or connection with people, the connection with creativity, the connection with self, and the connection with something greater than. A lot of the older people interviewed found this an easier way of talking about something greater than themselves if they didn't have religion in their lives and they could see the role that nature might be playing for them in terms of their believing in, respecting, admiring, connecting with something greater than themselves. So what the findings of the project were that the Connect Explore model was a way of assessing spirituality in a valid way, a valid and kind of measurable way, and that the 4 domains provided immediate access to an exploration of spirituality. And as I said, allows sub-themes to come through that contribute to a wider understanding of spirituality as this force that brings meaning and hope and purpose and connection into our lives. And a lot of the participant contributions really, without them kind of overtly talking about mind, body, spirit, definitely carried through aspects of this mind, body, spirit of their life and how spirituality to them is more than religion. So not only did the conversations help to the older people to articulate what was important to them, it also heightened their own understanding and appreciation of spirituality for themselves, that they could start to see how they were in fact spiritual, even if they'd never adopted that word to themselves before. So coming out of the research and we start to think about, okay, what are the practical applications of this? The Connect Explore model is something that can be used in the health sector as well as aged care professionals using it. It can also be used between older people in their own home or in an aged care residence. And so this is a wonderful way for peer-to-peer sharing of stories where, especially of the same generation, they can really bond and appreciate the diversity of other people's thinkings and really form stronger connections as well as exploring their own spirituality. And of course, aged care providers can use Connect Explore to explore how to restore a connection or assist an older person in finding meaning, purpose, and hope where there might be a disconnect and the older person is grieving that connection loss and wanting to reestablish some of their old ways of being. So not surprisingly, there was a lot of diversity of opinions and ideas around their own spirituality. Some people made observations of the past, others were very future focused. Some were quite sad to revisit some of the areas of their life, others very satisfied. Some people were very pithy in their statements. We'll see one of those in a little while. There was pragmatism and more philosophical musings. There was a certain section of the participants who were very religious, very happy to talk about God and other forms of religion. There were others who wanted nothing to do with religion. But everyone seemed to have a reason that they wanted in their life. They wanted a reason. Not surprisingly, this generation, most were not used to thinking about their inner selves. And so that was probably the hardest area and where more prompts were needed in the conversation to identify what people were really feeling about themselves internally, their inner being. Some were more concerned with thinking about others, and particularly in the role of service being of service to others, helping others. So let's look now at the conversational prompts. So these are the prompts that can be used by anyone to have these conversations, to explore spirituality with older people. I'm just going to, there we go. So the first one was connection with people. How do you feel about your connection with people? And then some of the sub-themes under that are family, loved ones, friends, carers or helpers. And how important to you is your connection to other people? That question is really interesting, and an essential part of, well, what the research project was undertaking, but also an essential question when having these conversations with older people, because most people can think of examples of how they feel about family and loved ones and friends. Sometimes they're happy stories, sometimes they're not happy stories, sometimes there's great trauma involved. But bringing those, from going through the sub-themes and getting more detail, to coming back up and asking how important is the connection to people, is really the assessment part, if you like, of this particular conversation about connection with people. How important is it? And that's the place to discover the connection or disconnection with this domain of people, of other people. How important to you is your connection to other people? The next is the domain of self, of yourself. This is the inner being. How do you feel about your connection with yourself? And then some of the prompts to help with that are faith, belief, purpose in life, meaning in life, hope. Hope is a really interesting one for older people to talk about. You can imagine that there are some people who feel very hopeful, perhaps because of religion, and feeling very stable about what comes next in their own thinking and belief. Hope for an easy death is something that was expressed. So the quality of hope shifts and changes for what is hoped for. And then again, we have that important question of coming back up after those details and asking how important to you is your connection to inner being. Now, I suspect if we ask the next generation, the next generation after the current generation who are in aged care, which will be a lot of us, that question will have probably more diversity in answers than the current generation, who aren't used to talking about their inner being, who aren't used to focusing on themselves, who have had a lot of conditioning around that being a selfish activity or an indulgent activity. So it'd be very interesting, and interesting for ourselves, because just like Connect 2, these prompts aren't just for older people. This was part of the project of exploring spirituality with older people. But I'm sure you'll agree that we can all benefit from having this conversation with ourselves about our own connection and the role that these sub-themes, if you like, play. The next domain is the connection with creativity. How do you feel about your connection with creativity? And then you've got a whole list, and this list you could modify this list to what is most important. There are so many forms of creativity. We've got the obvious ones listed on the page here: art, music, photography, cinema, movies, literature, books, poetry, plays, woodwork, metalwork, needlecraft, cooking, sport. But what's not included are some of the other ways, like home and room improvement and design. So depending on the individual, the prompts might need to change a little bit to help them identify what we might see as their creativity, but they can't. You know, it's one of those human things that we all tend to talk about, the fact that we're not creative unless we're explicitly creative and producing art or producing music. But there's creativity in the everyday. And so the prompts might need to be fine-tuned to reflect that in others. And the last domain is the something or someone higher than yourself. How do you feel about your connection with something higher, beyond, or bigger than yourself? I love the word beyond in this question because it really does take the role of religion as not the primary go-to for this question. Something higher, I think we all understand as religion, but something beyond ourselves can include something other. And so I feel it's a very inclusive word and a non-triggering word. Some of the prompts for this: God, nature, religion, a place or a space. Another really inclusive prompt that allows people to recall a time or a place where they have perhaps experienced true awe, you know, real awe and wonder. And so those kind of memories help to identify for the person and for the person interviewing just what is important and memorable to that person. Something else, because we can't just limit this to those 4 prompts, because there may be something else for that person. There are also some general prompts that run right across. How important to you is your connection to something or someone higher or bigger? How important to you is your connection to something or someone higher or bigger? How important are these 4 dimensions of spirituality at this specific time of your life? And that question is the one that, after the reminiscing, which a lot of the prompts will almost force people into reminiscing before they bring it back to the present. But then to ask as a follow-up, how important are these dimensions of spirituality at this specific time of your life, is another way of identifying connection and disconnection. In what way, if at all, do you feel at peace with yourself as the result of your spirituality? And the if at all is such an important part of that question, because one of the things that we know from the responses was that some people were very pessimistic, very confused as to why they were still here, and not at all certain about what, if anything, came next. So I think the if at all is a really important part of this question. So they're the conversational prompts that were used in the project and that can be used in having those conversations. But I thought you might like to hear some of the actual responses in the words used of the participants. So I've just pulled out at random a quote from each of the, can you just go back one, Marnie? So this is on their connection with people. Great, thank you. So this is Esme. Whoa, 100%. I find that my connection with people gets better as I get older. Your thoughts change towards people. You get much more tolerant and understanding. One comment was from a man who said that the carers, a lot of people talked about the carers in this connection with people. And one man said that the carers made it feel like Christmas Day every day, which was just so sweet. And I think for most of the others, family was the most important aspect of this connection with people, that the immediate reference point was family, whether they were there or not. Okay, the next one is on the connection with self. So this is about their inner being. My inner being, I don't think about things like that. We just got in and did things. We were told what to do by our parents mainly, but bosses too, of course. We didn't think they were right sometimes, but we still did as we were told. And I think this sentiment was shared by many of the participants, that that's just how things were done, that you didn't stop and question how it made you feel in an explicit and conscious way, that we just got in and did things. Yeah. This generation, as I said, weren't really open in many ways to discussing inner being. It was a very foreign concept to spend time on that. The next is on their connection with creativity. And this is Carl. Classical music was important in my younger days. I've seen about 15 or 20 operas. They were in the State Theatre at home. I would love to think about reading, gardening, and those things, but all day, every day, I listen to music. We know that music is so important for shifting energy. We know that of ourselves. When I used to keynote speak, one of the things that was so important in kind of creating instant energy was listening to the right music. Sports players do this now, sitting in the locker rooms with you often see, if you watch the footy or cricket, and you see some locker room footage, you see them, with headphones in, listening to their favorite tunes, right? Listening to their favorite songs to really rev them up. We know this. So we also know about the healing power of music and how it can really touch us in places and make us feel in a way that conscious thinking doesn't do. So I love this of Carl. The next is on their connection with something or someone higher. Responses to this were mixed, but most were brief. And Billy's was kind of the most succinct. Do you believe in God was the question that was asked to Billy. I don't like questions like that. So there were people who believed in God, and there were people who, like Billy, just didn't even want to talk about it. And then I've split out nature just for the purpose of sharing some more things. There was unanimous love and respect for nature. But Arthur had an interesting take. He said, but there's got to be something, because the trees, the birds, the animals, it's just too much to be sheer coincidence. There's got to be something, whatever that is. One day I might find out, but then I might never find out. And I think that's a beautiful note to leave it on, that there's got to be something. But what that something is a very personal question for everybody. I'd love to hear what you think of ESWOP and the conversations that can be had. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So have at it in the chat, or take yourself off mute, put your hand up, and we can take some questions or comments and observations.
Jackie, Matt here.
Hi, Matt.
Jackie, you've taken me back to when we did it a few years ago, and it was fabulous. And this morning, I sat down beside a gentleman who I'd never seen outside the residential facility before. And I visited him in his room. His room was often very dark, and he was sitting out in the sun. So I sat down beside him and said, "What is it about the sun that's drawn you out?" And I went back to those initial questions that have been fantastic, because they've helped frame my communication with people. And those questions of years ago, and it was interesting working around, because he was of that generation that didn't want to talk about personal faith, but was beamed when I asked him to tell me what made today so good. Yeah. I have to say, I started off by saying, "What made you get out of bed this morning?"
Oh,
and
great question.
Yeah. But he gave me a question nobody's answered that way. He said, "I have to. I need to pee."
Reality wins.
Anyway, he was fabulous. But it's been my opening question to people. You know, why did you get out of bed this morning? But nobody's answered it quite like him. But yes, I think with the idea of spirituality being bigger than that we can imagine.
Yes. Yeah. Matt, I love that you asked the question in the past, what made you get out of bed today, as opposed to what makes you get out of bed. I feel like there's a real difference between those two questions, and what makes you get out of bed doesn't necessarily, it's like asking someone, what's your purpose in life? It's a very difficult question to answer. But relating it to this morning is much more practical, right? It's much more immediate. So I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Terry has, hang on. Scott has asked, could questions about spiritual experiences be asked? Scott, would you like to come on the line and just expand on that question? You don't have to. But if you would like to, the invitation is there.
Yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So at the moment in the aged care centre where I work, there's one man who says that death is imminent, and that he is communicating with a spiritual being. He's also having dreams about people who have died that were good people, he tells me. He asked to see me because he wanted to try to understand what this meant, and I didn't tell him. I just encouraged him to flesh it out himself or to try to understand it. There's another woman there whose dead husband will come into the room, and she says hello dad to him and so on. So I've been reading books on these kinds of things, and I just wondered how that might be worked into this tool, which is about spirituality but sort of doesn't talk about that, and perhaps it could be worked into the transcendent being.
I think there's two aspects of it. One is in the connection with people as well, because I think that they're still having a relationship with important people or an important person in their life. They just happen to be dead. This is a really common thing we've found, that there are many, many, many older people who have some of their strongest relationships are with people who are dead. So I think that the connection with people could actually include dead friends and family. And I guess it's just a matter of getting a sense with that person how resilient they feel about talking about that. But certainly with the Scott, do you receive our newsletter?
Yes, I do,
because I wrote an article a couple of months ago, and it was actually about the process of aging, especially getting closer to death, and the frequency of deathbed visions. And so that might be a good thing to revisit.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Jackie?
Yes.
Was that the article in the Megan Best book?
Correct.
Yes, that was one of my. There were two favourites. I can't say you're totally the favourite. That was an exceptional article. I thought that was pivotal and challenging, and I still can't get my head around it. But I really appreciate that. And yes, I strongly recommend everybody have a look at that.
We linked the article that I wrote contained an excerpt, and we linked the full article. So thanks for giving that a shout out, because it was a terrific article to read. And
challenging and interesting and well-researched and thoughtful and practical. Exceptional work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You talked, I was a little bit late joining, sorry, that's my fault, not yours. You spoke, as we were talking, about people revisiting historical spiritualities, for want of a better phrase, or a practice or a faith system or lack of faith system that dated to their old life is the wrong phrase. Earlier life, that's a better phrase.
Yeah.
Did you find anything about people exploring new spiritualities in that space? So I heard lots about going backwards. Is there much about going forward and people who might have?
Funnily enough, there's not a lot that came out through this particular project, and I think that's just chance and happenstance. Actually, it just happened that the group of people, the 82 people who were questioned, didn't necessarily have that experience. But we know anecdotally that there are many people whose faiths shift, people who discover faith, but particularly people who have practiced a certain faith their whole life and now are interested in learning and practicing a different faith. We've certainly heard that a number of times over the years. People have brought those stories to us. But it just happens in this project that I could go through the interview results again, but I feel pretty confident in saying that that wasn't really an experience for this group of people.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Mm.
And I don't want you to revisit all your work. I know how hard work you've done already. But yes, as a chaplain, that's something I often see. So I was intrigued that
Yeah,
your
right.
prime focus was, at least in this study, has been historical as opposed to future per se.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good point. Thank you for raising it, though.
No,
Could I
thank you
just
for the
say,
reflection. Go, I'm going to shut up now.
could I just say something when the person mentioned about the people having dreams in a time of when they're touching certain areas, sometimes you can get rid of a lot of the rubbish in the dream, but there's often one solid thing where they can reach solid ground in that dream, and it's often good to explore, and then if they can find something that they can hold on in that dream, it often can give quite definite solace because they've reached that solid ground.
That's nice. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Mary. Let me look. Terry says, I notice a big difference between religiosity and spirituality, even if that spirituality is from their own religion. It seems liberating to many older people to consider there might be something beyond just religion. Indeed, I think that was one of the, as I said at the start, one of the cases for bringing nature from being a separate domain in Connect 2 to bringing it up into the domain of something greater, something beyond themselves. Because once people started thinking about nature as a possibility, that opens the door to other considerations as well. And I think you're right. I think that is liberating. There's some solace there as well. It's about perspective and feeling one's place. I really enjoyed the offers of examples to help the individuals express their spirituality within the domains. Thank you. Yeah, I hope those prompts are. Can you put the link or name up, please? Is that for, can you share the name of this book? Yes. I will ask Marnie to put in the chat the link to the ESWOP book, which for members is free of charge. I think it might be $20 for non-members. Not entirely certain about that, but Marnie will put the link in the chat. Also, you'll receive a recording of this webinar. And when that recording goes out, on that email will also be a link to ESWOP, the book, so the PDF. So you'll get that in a week or so as well. Luella says, I'm doing a PhD on a sense of purpose with older people receiving care at home. Purpose is defined as future orientated, but I have found the past, achievements, memories are an important part of people's sense of purpose today. Yeah, this seems to come out in the tool as well. Yes, it does. And yes, asking about a sense of purpose is a difficult question for people to answer. Yeah, you definitely have to be warmed up to it, I think. And, going back to Matt's question, I suppose, what made you get out of bed today is such a here and now question, that might be the way forward, the way into that conversation. Would some of these questions stir up regret, spending too much time at work at the expense of relationships? Yeah. If so, how to keep the individual wondering rather than closing down? I think this is the importance of being present with the person that you're talking to. It's a little bit like Connect 2. We have that same sense of responsibility, and it's why we, even though the tools are quite simple, with someone that you don't know, you definitely want to have all of those spiritual care practices of active listening and being present at your fingertips, because sometimes those feelings do need to be felt, and the person might want to or not want to feel, to go deeply into that. And I feel like that's one of the tools of the spiritual care practitioner, to know how to navigate that. I'd love to hear from some actual practitioners on the line, though, who might have some thoughts about this particular question. Would some of these questions stir up regret? And if so, how to keep the individual wondering rather than closing down? So if anyone's got some thoughts on that, that would be wonderful to share.
I think, just jumping in very quickly,
Yes.
sometimes people need to process their regret. They need to process their grief. So being able to sit with someone's sorrow in tears and lament, even particularly in a Christian context, helping the person to lament and to actually face, I'm really sad I didn't do X, Y, and Z, or I really miss Frank, or whatever, that I think is helpful. My own, as a practitioner, the only time I've had issues, or a significant issue, was with a reminiscence program in this space. And we had a person who had PTSD. And that triggered a whole pile of things. But that is unusual in that PTSD doesn't affect everybody. But like all good professions, we need to refer when we get out of our depth. I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a psychologist. So yeah, being aware that it's possible is important, but just good listening skills, I think, and being willing to be present in the pain is critical.
That's a beautiful perspective. Yeah. And Sally adds, oh, hang on, let me try and find this again. Stay with them in the present moment, especially their emotion in the present moment, as this can be a way for them to let go of the regret. Yeah, that's a good perspective as well. Yeah. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Sally. I noticed the time, everyone. It's 1:42. We've gone over the allotted time. I'm still happy to take any questions or observations as we wrap up. So put your hand up or come off mic if there's something that you're itching to say or share. Otherwise, we will begin the process of saying goodbye.
I just wanted to ask Jackie. Hi, I'm Estelle.
Hi, Estelle.
I've been a spiritual care practitioner here at Allura for 9 months now, so it's a new space for me. And there's been lots of learning along the way. One of the things that I have a lot of conversations with people about is, connecting to hope and finding meaning once they're in aged care. And a lot of them coming in are very aware that this is, their final years, or they'll be spending their final time here. I have found when I've asked people about, where they feel hope, or, asking them about hope or even meaning, a lot of people, when I ask that question, actually don't know how to connect with the feeling of hope, or actually don't know how to answer that. I'd be interested to hear what this project found, or how this project asked questions around that, or helped people to connect more strongly with, with that hope, or with that finding meaning.
Yeah.
Or later years of life.
So hope was one of the areas that was covered in the sub prompts. So hope was definitely something that was explicitly talked about. And can I get this up now for me to do a quick look at? Just bear with me 1 second, because what I'll do is just have a quick, I can tell you the overview of that. I'm technologically challenged, so you just have to bear with me for 1 second. It is such an interesting area. You're right. It can be.
A lot of those that are in the home that I look after too, a lot of people actually aren't very strongly religious. So I think, when we ask questions about, what happens after somebody passes or what they believe in, a lot of them don't have that strong faith sense.
Yeah.
I do, the ones that don't struggle for meaning as much, I have noticed, because they're like, this is what I believe in and this is what I'm here for. Whereas a lot of people that don't have that, I find, come in and, holding on to hope when they're not sure what's ahead of them, holding on to what's my life mean now. Yeah, there's a real challenge in finding that for them.
So one of the things that came out, I'm just revisiting the hope section. One of the things that came out was that most people equated hope with dying, which I think is really interesting. And so that's
looking forward to that passing.
Looking forward to it, and also hoping that it's a good death.
Yes. Yeah.
And it seems that the kind of the two camps, this is for those who didn't have strong faith, right? Who had a very strong belief in eternal hope, in their future life. So there's those people. And then for the remainder of the people, there's sort of the two camps. There's the hope associated or equating hope with dying. And then others who were just in the, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or I think it's important, but not necessarily knowing how to articulate their own sense of hope. But most of the interviews didn't necessarily use, so in the interviews there were like the person doing the interview, who'd been kind of trained to do the interview, would sometimes give little interjections and nudges along the way, just as you would do quite naturally, like, oh, that's interesting, can you tell me more about that, that sort of thing. In the hope section, there wasn't so much of that. There seemed to be more an understanding that people often had to go through recollections to come back to themselves today and identify what hope meant for them today. So that there was a little path that they had to travel down first before they could lock into that answer. Yeah. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got some. Sorry,
Jack. I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Or two questions. A, what are you working on now? What's the next project? Can you give us a take on what's moving forward? And B, is there some way we can get in contact with you to ask more details on all those things without boring everybody else to tears?
Certainly. I'm just having a quick look. So I think the best thing is to go through Marnie, who's our central extraordinary individual who handles Rachel and myself and all of the admin associated with our organisation. So she's our point person, particularly because I don't work full time anymore. So I don't want to be a bottleneck of any questions. And that email is also on our newsletters, but it's admin@meaningfulage.org.au, right? As for what comes next, there's three things that we're working on. Just if I bring the focus back up just to Meaningful Aging Australia, perhaps this is a good way to end as well. What's coming up? I can talk from my plate because I tend to be involved with the projects. So
Mhm.
on my plate are 3 things for this year and into the first half of next year. And that is completing a Learning Light series, which is taking every standard of the new standards and fleshing it out when it comes to spiritual care and spirituality.
Yep.
The second is creating a new resource that has and contains both Connect to and ESWOP so that it's all in one place. And the third is the second chapter of Meet Akira, which is going to be on death and dying. And that's called Akira Says Goodbye.
Wonderful.
So that's what we've got coming up. I'm just going to look at the chat. There's lots of thank yous and thank yous, not just for Marnie and myself, but also for all of the wonderful people who have talked. Marnie's put, sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. Thank you to all those who have asked questions and made comments as well in the chats and also live. Beautiful. I'm just making sure there's no other question in there. I think I have answered all those questions. I hope I have. Forgive me if I haven't. All right, so thank you, everybody. Everyone's putting thanks in the chat, and I thank you back. It was lovely to have you here. It's always great to talk about ESWOP and just the depth of these conversations and what they can mean for people and what we can learn in terms of being able to provide the best aged care that we can, particularly from an aspect of individual spirituality. So thank you very much and look forward to seeing you next time. Okay, bye now.